many people have been saying so many things, but we are one of only 2 people on the earth that add up to 1 billion. And we can be found, Nilotic people, spread worldwide, be that in the East, be that in the Philippines, way back up in the corners of the bush with the Negrito people, be that on Guam, be that in Papua New Guinea, Hawaii, no matter where you go, we are. He also told us where heaven was, and I'm not going to repeat where that was. And he's right. Then he told us where the Holy Land was. A lot of people are loading up this year to go to the Holy Land. You always have to ask, brothers and sisters, which Holy Land do you mean? And then, of course, you know by the people who look at you cross-eyed who is correct. Because there's some people that can't understand that there's more than one Holy Land, and there's one that's older than all the other Holy Lands. So he was the one that told us. And where others talked about the Holy Land, Dr. Ben took thousands of people back to the Holy Land so that they could stand on holy ground and experience those things for themselves, culminating last year with 1,000 African people showing up in Africa, having a grand celebration in Aswan, Kemet, and staked a claim to the history that had been stolen and bringing that history back to our people. His name, all over Kemet, is the one name that everybody knows. If they can't speak one word of English, if they can only speak one word, that word is Dr. Ben. They know. Any person in Arabic knows. That's true whether you talk about Nubians or whether you talk about Arabs. It doesn't make any difference. Whether you talk about the poor man on the street, whether you talk about the person who is in the diplomatic corps and the government, they all know Dr. Ben. And it's not only, of course, in Kemet, but there are other places all over the world where that is true. He taught us that we should use primary sources. And this was one of the things that impressed me most about Dr. Ben's book. I guess if I've been influenced by anyone for any particular reason, that is really as big a reason as anything else. Dr. Ben and Joel Rogers have a special way of collecting the data and putting it before you. They do not insult their audience. They say that anyone can see the same thing that the scholars saw. And so their books are loaded with pictures of the real thing, with the manuscripts, with the carvings, with the paintings, with the bones, so that we can see the primary sources, knowing that the empirical evidence is not necessarily mystery evidence. And then he says that we have to share these sources with the masses. That means that everyone must know the same thing that the experts know. And then he showed us self-determination. I remember with the ASCAC conference in New York, the kind of lesson that was taught there. They talk about the fact that you get beat up once in a while. Well, one of the outcomes of the ASCAC conference was that there was somewhere close to $30,000 in profit made from that conference. Because the First World Alliance got together in their pockets and advanced the money and asked not one penny from anyone to put on that conference. And when they finished taking care of all their expenses, they had $30,000 and then more than that. They decided, unlike many groups, that they wouldn't just keep this $30,000 or squabble over it, but they had a generous orientation toward the rest of ASCAC nationwide and actually gave that money to the national office so that it could be split up among all the ASCAC people nationwide, and that had been produced by our own efforts. But the main thing was that this was his lesson, his unbending lesson about self-support and self-determination, and that we would have a live example of that. He taught us that Kemet, Nubia, Kush, Tanutu were our beginnings. He taught us that we migrated around the world populating it for the first time. He taught us that we built civilization for the first time and also the first nation. He taught us that we were the world's first teacher. He taught us that when people invaded us and oppressed us, that we fought back when we were not united. And then he taught us that we have never stopped struggling over these 2,000 years that Africa has been under siege. He taught us also that victory is in our future and that we shall win without a doubt. One of the things that Dr. Ben taught, and I'd like to offer this as a way of thinking about Kemet for those who get confused on time, something very special that helps us to understand the Nile Valley, is that there's something called kingdoms and periods. I'm going to add something. I'm going to add something to the chronology of Kemet, to the periodization of Kemet tonight that I think is appropriate. The periodization, if you look at it, notice that there are things called dynasties, then there are things called kingdoms, then there are things called periods. There's supposed to be around 30 dynasties, which means families. And then those families are grouped together into kingdoms. That's when big things were going on. And then some other families are grouped together, and they're called periods. That's when not much was going on. Now they've got these dynasties and families, kingdoms and periods broken down in a very special way. So we hear something called the Old Kingdom. We hear something about the Old Kingdom. Then we hear something next about the Middle Kingdom. Then we hear something next about the New Kingdom. Now, in between those kingdoms, there are periods. So the Old Kingdom will be families 3 through 6, back in the Old Kingdom. That's when the pyramids were built. And that's also when native Africans were in charge. So this is the high-tech period. And so the high-tech period is when you have a kingdom. Now there's an intermediate period that comes in after the pyramid period. That's when there's a breakdown. This time it's internal. Not much happens. But all of a sudden there's a revival and we get kingdoms again. See, we got periods when nothing is going on. Then we got kingdoms. Kingdoms come back. Suddenly you got that great 11th and 12th dynasty. Again, they began to build things, and particularly they make some major leaps apparently in mathematics, because we've got the Rhine and Moscow papyrus telling us the nature of the scientific thought that is going on at that time. And again, all we've got to do is look at the pictures of the kings and queens during that time, and even the mummies that we have from that time, and we will see that the kingdom was a high-tech period. That's when native people were in charge. This is the point. Every time you have a kingdom, the indigenous people are in charge. Whenever you have a period, somebody else is in charge. That's the point that I'm trying to make. After the Middle Kingdom, you get the first period where people come in from the outside. And this is when we say the Hyksos come in and so forth. Not much happened. Nothing left from that period that mattered. A few rings, a couple little sphinxes and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, we get another kingdom, which is the New Kingdom. And in that New Kingdom, now we get this grand explosion of architecture and science and philosophy and theology. All these things began to happen. But that's when the native people are back in charge again. That's the dynasty of Tutankhamun and Tutmosis and Nefertiti and Nefertari and so forth, and Ramesses. That's when the big grand golden age occurred. All of that's native. And then after that, we get an intermediate period again. We get a breakdown again. Now, we get some funny periods coming after that, which are the period, they call it things like the Saitic period, but not the Saitic kingdom. You get the Greco-Roman period, but not the Greco-Roman kingdom. Now, you notice that there's one left out, and that's the one that Dr. Clark always talks about, Africa's last walk, Kemet's last walk in the sun. They normally don't call this a kingdom, but it was. That's the 25th dynastic period. That was also a kingdom. We're calling that, in this new periodization, the fourth kingdom. And I want to call that the revival kingdom. So that I'm saying to you that what we ought to talk about, based on Dr. Ben's work so far, is that there is an old kingdom, which is all native. That means all black. There is an intermediate period that follows that. That's the breakdown. There is a middle kingdom, which is high-tech again, all native and all black, followed by a second intermediate period, which is the foreign intermediate period. This is around 1700 BC and so forth. Then all of a sudden you get this giant step around 1500 BC when the new kingdom comes in. All native, all black. And then you get a third intermediate period. And then around 700 BC you get this revival kingdom. When they come, that's the one they call the Nubian dynasty. All of them were Nubian dynasties, but they call these the Nubian dynasty. And in the Nubian dynasties, you get Piakni and Shabaka and so forth, and that's the revival kingdom. I want to suggest to you that the thing that differentiates, and I'm going to tell you what the fifth kingdom is in just a moment, but I want to suggest to you the thing that differentiates a kingdom from a period is this. All kingdoms are native, all periods are foreign. Mm-hmm. All kingdoms are creative, mm-hmm. All periods are imitative or destructive. You got that? Because there's only been one that was not destructive, and that was the Greek period, which was imitative. The Roman period was destructive. Okay? All kingdoms have continuity with the past. Remember, when the 25th dynasty came in, they went back to the 12th dynasty, to their ancestors. That's what they call their ancestors, those in the Middle Kingdom. And then they apparently went back to the Old Kingdom when they looked to the past. So that the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and what I'm calling the Revival Kingdom, these kingdoms had continuity culturally in every possible way, where the periods, especially those foreign periods, were periods of disjunction and disruption. And so I'd like to propose at this time, because something has begun to happen that happened as it did in the 17th dynasty. There was a pharaoh who came out of the south, who got tired of the people down near Cairo, where that is now, Memphis, or where Hikupata was at that time. Got a little tired of being kicked around. The king had sent this word up there, the hippopotami are making too much noise. And I can hear them all the way down here in Hikupata. Would you please shut up those hippopotami? He knew he was being picked on. Second Enrei decided that he would put a stop to that and started the war of liberation. A king, a pharaoh, came from the south and pushed out this outside dynasty and created then this new kingdom. And so the revival kingdom was like that in this revival period as well. But in the fifth dynastic period, it is like the beginning of the new kingdom. I believe that a pharaoh has come out of the south, who has now initiated what we ought to call the resurrection kingdom. Who has done what Second Enrei has done, who has awakened and mobilized his people to claim and retake their faith. And that pharaoh is none other than the person who sits here near us, doing exactly what the ancient Kemites did all the time. If you look at what they did, they were builders for eternity. Think about this for a moment. If you ask what was the African world view in operation at the time that Kemet was moving, it was organized in every way to build for eternity. When a pharaoh built a pyramid, he was talking about not the fact that that pyramid would last forever. He was not a dummy. He knows that even rocks crumble in due time. What was eternal was the principles that he was manifesting when he was building pyramids. The same thing was true. He knew, the biggest garbage that's ever been spread is that the pharaohs didn't know that people could find their mummies. And they thought that the mummy was going to get up and walk and move around again. No, in preparation for burying the mummy, what happens if you're the king? And if on the day you become king, you start to build your tomb. Everybody who's looked on the walls of the tomb knows what that means, because there are certain moral principles that are etched on those walls. And if you have to build your tomb today, thinking about the moral principles that you're accountable for when you die, then you see that the principles are the things that were eternal and not the mummy body that was expected to be eternal. So these were people who were building pyramids and making mummies for eternity. Hollywood has taken this stuff and turned it completely upside down. Mummies are now walking around choking people with rags coming off their shoulders, and they're the epitome of evil. Go through any tomb and find something evil in the tomb. Find it written on the wall and see what they're talking about. When they're talking about moral principles, there's nothing evil about it. Hollywood has turned that upside down. It's turned the culture upside down in terms of the building of pyramids too. Slaves, according to Hollywood, built the pyramids because they come from a worldview that can't understand how people can be mobilized and committed to principle, and they will voluntarily give their labor. These were not being used to build the pyramids or any of the other buildings that are in the Nile Valley. These buildings for eternity could build for eternity because they studied the eternal itself. They studied nature and they studied its principles. And on the basis of the study of nature and its principles, created religion and created philosophy. All you have to do to see that they were correct is to look at what's happening today. We're about to destroy our world because we're not building for eternity. We're building for tomorrow. You're about to destroy all the ozone layer. Little children in about 10 years won't be able to play outside if they're white. In 10 years' time, skin cancer, let me tell you, there's already enough fluorocarbons in the environment, already enough to double the exposure to skin cancer, even if you don't put another puff up there. And yet, we cannot outlaw the passing of fluorocarbons into the environment because we're building for tomorrow rather than for eternity. And we're ready to destroy, based on the economic needs that we have right now, the very thing that protects the earth itself. And there's only one ozone layer that's ever been up there, and it's never been moved before, and you don't know how to put it back. And yet we can't keep from destroying it. That's what we mean by not building for eternity. When they built for eternity, they learned that they could express their eternal principles in signs and symbols. It seems to me that for a person who has helped us to understand these things, not merely that African people were the first people, not merely that they were the first people to develop a civilization, but to study that civilization itself because it offers a challenge in 1988 as a way to live your life. So that if a person who has made us aware of these kind of things is to be honored truly, it seems to me that there are a few things that ought to be on our agenda, and I want to make these recommendations to you. Some of these have already been made, but let me just tell you what we have to do if we really care about Dr. Ben and we really take seriously what his life has meant to us. It is time for a biography on Dr. Ben. It is time for someone to take up this challenge. I don't know if it's going to be Cornell or whether it's going to be Temple University or it's going to be the Kemetic Institute, but someone has to put this biography together so that we don't lose what has been done. It is time for a full-length film on Dr. Ben.
Yes.
And I mean a dramatic, we probably need two. One that's dramatic and one that is documentary, because I don't think you can really do justice in either one of those to the thing that the two of them could accomplish together. Third, there's time for an endowed chair in Africana studies with a focus on the Nile Valley. And I believe we can raise $1 billion to do that. Number 4, it's time for a department of chematology at a major university under our control. Number 5, it is time for a Yosef ben Jochannan Liberation Prize, which will be awarded to someone who best exemplifies the principles that Dr. Ben Jochannan has been trying to teach us. Number 6, it's time for us to institutionalize the idea of pilgrimage to the Holy Land, especially to Abdu, or Abydos as the Greeks call it, especially to Waset, or as Thebes, as the Greeks called it, in Upper Kemet, which is the spiritual center of the ancient world during the time of the kingdom. It is time to stimulate the proliferation of classical African civilization study groups. In addition, we must ensure that thousands of people know the Kemetic and Meroitic language. Thousands of people must be taught Kemetic and Meroitic language, talking about Meta-Netia, and as we learn more about the Meroitic language, these two languages are central to our understanding of ourselves and our presentation of ourselves to the world. And our children can learn them. The masses of our people must be exposed to these languages that they claim as their own. It is time that we know and use, that we know thoroughly and use well the Kemetic literature. We have stories, we have teachings, wise sayings, we have all genre of literature have been created, accessible to us, still teaching the ancient lessons of old time. All it has to be done is that it has to be put in a form that's accessible to the masses of our people. It's time for us to produce popular film and video telling the masses of our people what we know. It's time for us to change school curriculum at the public school level and at the university level. Students at Stanford University have taken the lead and have challenged their faculty and have presented a case that even the faculty had to accept. So that they changed this course about Western civilization and decided, someone said that they were trying to find a way to put black into the curriculum. All they were trying to do was to get Stanford to tell the truth. If Stanford tells the truth, you can't keep black out of the curriculum. It's time for us to publish a standard timeline so that people can understand how to use the Kemetic information. It's time for us to publish maps that make sense so that people can locate the action on the map of Africa and its relationship to Kemet. It is also time for us to mobilize systematically our artists, our poets, and our musicians to help us put these messages out. Tonight, I have several photographs that were presented to me showing some of the things that have been done. And at First World and other places, some of the art that is accompanying the meetings, they're just absolutely awesome. Some of the poetry that we heard when we were in Kemet this time, expressing the truths that we know, will reach people before speeches could ever reach them. So it's time for us to do that. It's time for us to lobby Hollywood performers. I'm talking about African producers, African American producers, African writers, African actors, and to let them know what we know, and to let them know that we know that they have an obligation to carry this message through their media. Per'ah in Kemetic is the word that was later changed to mean Pharaoh. Per'ah meaning the great house. When a pharaoh had completed a particularly important assignment, such as conquering the enemy in order to establish a buffer zone or boundary, he would finish his work by erecting a conquest stela. And on that stela would say what he had done. And he would boast of what he had done, so that we would have a record of what he had done. On the conquest stela of Pharaoh Yosef ben Jochannan, many things can be said, and that's what we've been creating over the past day and a half. And somewhere in that conquest stela, it says this: Sarah, Nubtawi, Meriamun, Hekawaset, Nubhara, Nekbet Wajet, Yosef ben Jochannan, Setep in Ra, Ankh Seneb Jed Uas, Jetta, son of Ra, Lord of the two lands, beloved of Ammon, prince of Waset, golden Horus, favorite of the two ladies, the chosen of Ra, Yosef ben Jochannan, all life, all like rock forever. What will be a series of tributes to Dr. Ben that we will try to keep brief. We know that many of our visitors in New York City have a bus that will be arriving in Ithaca in about 45 minutes to take them back to New York City, so we want to try to move the program along. We know that you've been with us for some time, but I'm sure that the treat that you just had was well worth the wait. Let's give Dr. To begin our tribute to Dr. Ben, we can only call on an individual who truly needs no introduction. At the possible risk of embarrassment to some of the other participants on the program, I'm just going to tell the truth.
Thank you.
When we sent out the invitation asking that everyone reply by a certain date, the first call that we got was from John Henry Clark.
That's
Someone who's probably busier than everybody else that we wrote to and inquired about. But John Henry Clark, if he says he'll meet you at 7:30 in the morning, he'll be there.
Yeah, he will.
He has been an inspiration for all of us. I've stated on many occasions, many times, that my education, even after my PhD, that I went to the finishing school of John Henry Clark.
Yeah.
My knowledge wasn't complete until I attended those seminars that John Henry Clark has been holding out in the hallway here, over at the Africana Center, wherever John Henry Clark is. There's a seminar in progress. Without ado, John Henry Clark.
I will speak briefly on the signature works of Dr. Ben. The signature works I consider to be Black Man of the Nile, Africa Mother of Western Civilization, the African Origins of Major Western Religions. By signature, I mean these works compose the pillow of the historical house that he built. And these pillows support his concepts, his research methods, and his ultimate purpose of getting a point across. He's written many books other than these books. I'm concentrating on these books principally because these books become the writing laboratory, the resource, the basic means of creating the other books. And we have known each other for more than a generation now, and he's as close to me as any brother I have ever had. And like most brothers, we have some differences of opinion that we actually enjoy. This is why we keep having it. He insisted he's right, and I insist that I'm right. But the argument is about nothing of any great significance in history, no matter which one is right or wrong. But if we conceded that, we stop the argument, and that would be some fun and a great deal of camaraderie between us. we'll go by the board. All right. I'm going to relate one time I've seen Dr. Ben confront many questions and many situations. He joined me at Paul UAC, and I was head of the Heritage Teaching Program. He was quite successful in getting across certain aspects of history that I had not thought about at that time. I've seen him enjoy success. I'm going to tell you about one of his failures that he's probably forgotten about. A few years ago, we on a lecture tour in London, lecturing in the councils of the British Council, the chamber of the British Council. I think it must have been the third lecture. The other two had been quite success. Our audience increasing night by night, and the Caribbean community in London was coming, and we were well received. Then it got to the problem where the ladies in London began to discuss what the ladies here are discussing, the shortage of black men. And one lady began to talk about the shortage and whether we should entertain polygamy or not. And then someone said, why are you talking about black men and you're married to this little bloodless Englishman here? And she said that, well, he was available and the brother wasn't available. And she said, now as for him, I not only don't love him, I don't even like him. Then in discussion about, they began to discuss whether there should be a division. In as much as one woman said, I'd rather have 1/4 of a man than no man at all. And then another lady objected to that and said, I know that a man can make love to 4 different women, but can he love 4 different women? I looked at Ben and pulled my chair back. I asked the last question. Over to you. Ben gave them a very involved, intellectual answer, well thought out. The lady rose and said the answer is totally unsatisfactory. Now we're talking about Ben's success, but as one of his failures. And I think the main reason he failed because I deserted, I turned a pure coward into I didn't come to the system because I frankly had no answer myself. I didn't ask them for the information in the first place. All right, be that as it may, that lecture tour that we made in London was so successful that some of the black members of the council has transcribed the lecture and turned it into a book that's going to be published soon. It'll probably be the first book that we have done together, although I propose a number of books that we should be doing together, especially a chronology of great events and personalities in our history. And that can be done comparatively easy because he's already done this in the 10 volume, but the idea is to break it down to one simplified volume, and we have not had the time to sit down and do that. That's one of the many things that we've tried to do. We gave lectures out in Ohio for 3 summers. All these lectures were transcribed, the tantamount to about 3 books. And if we had to sit down and edit it, we've got another book we could collaborate on. All right, now, when I mentioned signature work, I'm just going to mention briefly, what is the significance of his signature work for today? Inasmuch as I maintain that history is a current event, and there's no such thing as ancient history. Everything that happens in the past is interactive
on the present. The first man that sneezed is still influencing the atmosphere, and the first kid threw a pebble in the ocean is influencing the ocean and will for all time to come, be it ever so minuscule. There is no insignificance in the world because every human action is significant. Now, what is the significance for today of Black Man on the Nile? And when you pick up a book, you must find out how relevant is the book for now. How relevant is the past in understanding the present and predicting the future. And all these elements must be there. And in his signature works, all of the elements are there. From Black Man on the Nile, we can get a way of examining Nile Valley civilization in total. And we can examine it beyond the word Egypt. And we must look at the fact that Nile Valley civilization consists of more than Egypt. And at its height, it extended all the way down to present-day Ethiopia, Uganda, in that particular area. We must take the total of the river. We must look at it and realize that the Nile River is a contradiction. Most rivers start in the north and flows to the south. This one starts in the south and flows to the north. What we're dealing with here is a great cultural highway that brought people in and out of Egypt. Now, in the serious study of Black Man in the Nile and his family, you've got to study, you've got to see something else that is relevant. And that Egypt was not a monolithic nation composed of one type of people. It was a pluralistic nation and a composite of many nations. And because it was a composite of many nations, it became the inheritor of the greatest richness and the greatest talent in the history of the world, and produced the most finished nation in the history of the world. And what you call Egypt was the culmination of the great talent of many African nations, many nations on the Nile Valley. What you do, look at a map of Africa. Look at the Nile River. That is the womb that did propose that the continent of Africa is a woman's body. The womb is the Nile River, the Nile Valley, the Nile River. From that womb came a number of children, and from those children came other children that spread out throughout the totality of Africa and that influenced Africa for years to come. Look at the area called the Sahara. And imagine the great states in the Sahara, once called the Green Sahara. Once it began to dry up, all the people did not go to the south. Some went to the south, present-day Nigeria, that can be proven. But the bulk of them, talented people, went toward the east and toward the Nile. Now we see the Nile area inherited a great body of talent one time after the other. And you can understand why it would produce the finished nation, a complete nation, and the finest technical nation in the history of the world, whose techniques still not understood to this very day. All right, Africa, mother of Western civilization, in a serious study of it, will show us that Western civilization has built its foundation on a sea of sand. It has built its foundation on something it cannot defend. And you can understand, once you see all this grandeur, why those who did not produce it would want to relate to it and claim it. Now, when Nile Valley civilization was getting its start, Europe was pulling itself from under an ice cap. Do you think people would come from under an ice cap, come all the way across Africa, build a civilization, go back into Europe, go back under the ice cap, stay for 3,000 years before they build a decent shoe in Europe, a house with a window. Makes no sense. Once you look at the tracing of the elements of Western civilization, you know that it has its basis in Africa, and that Western civilization is not civilization at all. We are confused between civilization and mechanization. You think turning wheels makes civilization, flush toilets make civilization, telephones make civilization. None of this makes a civilization. To have a civilization, you have to be civil. The European has never been civil. He has made a political use of all the religions, of the sciences. And if you continue to trace and look at the African elements of religion, you would have to deal with a lot of present-day mythology in relationship to the Hebrew entry. Needed success. The Christians wouldn't make a complete assessment of this. You have to look at the Islam again. You have to make a separation between Islam and Arabism. Very few black people are hung up with Islam. They hung up with Arabism. You have to make a clear distinction. Then you first have to admit that the Arab is the most corrupt element within Islam. The religion is not less because of this corruption. I mean, you should not think the religion is less, but rescue that religion from those who've despoiled it and detracted it. Look at the period when Ethiopia literally saved that religion, when the prophet was about to be driven out of Mecca, driven out of Arabia. 108 followers go to Ethiopia. Go, he said, to that land of righteousness where no one is wrong. And on his deathbed, he was supposed to say, no, Islam will never forsake Ethiopia when Ethiopia is in distress. Nobody keeps any promises to us. Very few nations in Africa had more problems with Islam than Ethiopia. Now, this is the value of looking at the signature works in order to realize that these are the pillows for the other works. These are the pillows for the current works. These are the pillows. If he had not written one, he could not have written the other. I do not think he would have ever written the massive study, We Are the Black Jews, had he not been very clear about the Hebrew entry and what the Jews did or did not do in Africa in the period when there was no such word as Jew. This also leads to a careful examination of who are those Europeans now calling themselves Jews. Probably all converts. Now to understand this, you got to look at the last dispersion, the Roman dispersion, 70 AD. Where did they go? If they didn't go into Europe, very few went into Western Asia. Where did they go? Now there's clear evidence that a great number of them went down into Africa, lived in ancient Ghana for 400 years. Jews had purposely forgotten their African heritage. And those in Europe have claimed the prerogative to interpret the entire religion, and all of those are converts. There's probably not a single person on the face of the earth called a Jew who is a descendant of the biblical Jew. And they copied a lot of African stories, retold them, personified them, put themselves into the stories as though it was their own. Now this is the basis of the signature work. The basis and the meaning of the signature work is what it tells us about the past that we can understand about the present and look at how the future will have to be shaped. I think Africa has been Dr. Ben's mission as well as my mission. It has been the all-conclusive obsession of his existence. And when men devote their entire life to something with the passion that both of us have put into the subject, they deserve something a little different from a dinner and apply, because they revert back to their knowledge of the ancient world when there was a true humanity, and the scholar was close to the priest, and the scholar was taken care of by the people because he was a servant of the people. And when Africans had sharing societies and caring societies before Europe, and of course before Karl Marx, and classless societies before Karl Marx. I think what we need to do in looking at the works of Dr. Ben and other Africans who are now making a giant strides toward the re-evaluation of African history in total, is that we should use these works to find ourselves and realize that we have been bowing and scraping and imitating a bunch of juvenile delinquents who came out of Europe, shooting babies in the back and passing themselves off as superior human beings. I think the natural people will now have to take some responsibility in changing the earth and reclaiming the earth and giving it some kind of order and some kind of humanity that will adhere to the best in all people. And we can do all of this without taking anything from anyone. We can take back what belongs to us and develop that. It's more than we can do. I'm saying that this is our mission, and this is the kind of legacy that we need to leave to the world. This, of course, in conclusion, is tomorrow's work. And I have often said the time to start tomorrow's work is today. All right.
Representing the Harlem community, Sister Latrella Thornton.
Hotep. Tonight we have all gathered in this place to help celebrate a new beginning for a very special individual. A multi-talented individual who has, through his lifelong efforts of insightful teaching, consistency of dedication, and the boundless love he holds for his people, sought to transform all of us nationally and internationally into a worldwide African collective by pushing us and sometimes carrying us from the shadows of historical ignorance into the light of African knowledge, the knowledge of ourselves and our antiquity. His contributions to the African experience are much more than can be shared in this brief tribute, but indeed it is without equal. He has written numerous books, articles, educational pamphlets, etc. He is a master professor, Egyptologist, philosopher, anthropologist, and historian. He also helped lay the historical and philosophical foundations for the organizations such as the First World Alliance and the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, ASCAC. We are indeed fortunate to be in the same time and space with an African spirit that has had such an impact on the African world community in the field of rescuing and reconstructing African history and African consciousness. Dr. Ben is loved and respected worldwide, but there is no place on the earth that he is loved and respected more than in the Harlem community, where he resides. He has always been a brother of the people, and in this community he has, for many years, taught and fought to educate the grassroots African, the brother on the corner, the sister on the front of the step, and be in the places other scholars would never be. He would teach us of our greatness as a people and of the unequal contributions to humanity that sprang from our African past. We are here to represent this African community and all grassroots communities worldwide to show our appreciation for such a dedicated African spirit as Dr. Ben. So at this celebration of transition, we now have the opportunity to demonstrate our feelings for Dr. Ben by bearing a gift of love and gratitude, and also to honor a very special African. And to you, Dr. Ben, the whole community has collected $1,000. Only a beginning. Only a beginning. The African community is in your debt, Dr. Ben. You have enabled us to resurrect our gods, and so we call on our gods for you. May our gods of Africa always be with you. May Wasir give you strength and stability. May Jehudi continue to flower you with wisdom and knowledge. May you always walk in righteousness with Ma'at. May Amun-Ra give you energy and power to continue your mission on the planet. May the Nameless One, the source of all things, enable the community to always support you and secure your continuation in the struggle for the liberation of our people. Amen. Hotep.